萨埵多苏揭多耶阿拉哈帝三藐三菩提揭。
Namo Saranto Suchedoye Alahadi Samya Sambuddhaya.
Recite together. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。You can recite the new version. So if you can follow after me. Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound.
Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound.
Rarely is encountered even in a billion eons.
Rarely is encountered in a billion eons.
But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently.
Now we see it
Hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Okay, all Buddhas and Bodhisattva, Venerable Master, Dharma Master Jin-Fo, and all good and wise Dharma friends, good evening. Welcome to our Saturday Sutra lecture. As you can see, tonight we actually have real people sitting here in front, Jin-Fo Shi and myself. Reverend Heng Shi is actually on a trip. So he's in on the other side of the world, and he's on a trip. So he on 2 levels he can't be here. So tonight, Jin-Fo Shi and me are, you could say, standing in to do the sutra lecture. And as we have been doing in the past, we've been going over the sutra called the Sutra of the Buddha's Teaching on Infinite Life. In Chinese, it's 佛说无量寿经. And so tonight we'll have a chance to continue to explore this sutra text. And before we begin, we would like to invite everyone to together recite the Buddha's name, maybe for just 2 or 3 minutes, just to, you could say, bring in the presence of the Amitabha Buddha and the Lotus Pool Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. It's just a kind of way to settle our hearts so that those who maybe have been traveling around today or doing various things, before the sutra lecture starts, we can gather in our minds. So if people would join Jin-Fo Shi or myself to recite the Buddha's name. Okay? Namo Amito Pho Aina Mo Amido 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 Pho Aina みどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼあみどぼ。So, good evening again. Today is May 6, 2017. We actually just celebrated the bathing Buddha ceremony today at Berkeley Monastery. I believe just a few days ago on Wednesday, it was the actual Buddha's birthday, and that was what, May, I think, 2nd? Go back, Friday, Thursday, May 3rd. May 3rd. So that was the actual day of the Buddha's birthday, and the weekend before that, people went up to the 10,000 Buddhas to bathe the Buddha. So you could say in some ways today is a special day at Berkeley Monastery. We had a chance to have a lot of our Dharma friends and new people come to, what we do is we bathe a little baby Buddha in the middle of the hall. And so that was what we did for today. But tonight, what we're going to do is investigate the sutra on the Buddha speaks of the Buddha's teachings on infinite life. And so what I would like to invite you to do is to maybe open up your sutra text. If you're online, I believe there should be a link for the sutra text. And as we usually do it, we will go over the Chinese, read over the Chinese, and then read over the English, and then begin a kind of an explanation of the sutra. If people have been following this sutra series, what we've been doing is mostly storytelling. We've been going over disciple by disciple in a fair amount of detail each time. And the spirit of it is so that as we meet these disciples in the sutras, we kind of have a sense of who they are. Right? We oftentimes in the beginning of the sutra text, we read, oh, Venerable Ananda was there, Venerable Shariputra was there, Venerable Dianna was there, Venerable Maha Kashyapa was there, Venerable Maha Kashtila was there, Venerable Maha Katha was there, a lot of Sanskrit names. And we probably go, well, what does that mean? I don't even know who these people are. And so what we've been trying to do is give everyone a sense of who these people are so that when you read them, you go, oh, I know kind of who that is. I can kind of relate to that person. I know that person's, you could say, a life story, how they cultivated, so on and so forth. So by having that, I think it makes the sutra text much richer. Every night we recite the Amitabha Sutra, and like tonight we did that. And you'll see that many of the people we've explained in the text so far appear in that list. And we recite that every other day. So in some ways it's very practical, is that if we get a sense of these people, then as we recite their names or read them in the sutra text, all of a sudden we have a lot more, you could say, space in our imagination, in our experience of these people to draw on. So tonight, maybe we can start with the Chinese text. We're still on the first and second page, and given that we're just reading all of their names, we were thinking, again, start from the beginning, read all the names, both in English and Chinese, just to give you the flavor of all the people here, and then we'll tell a story of the next couple of people. So we're on the left side of the page in Chinese. I invite Dharma Master Jin-Fo, if you could read the Chinese, because my Chinese pronunciation is not very good. Today, Jin-Fo talked about the 六大宗旨, which is the 6th grade principles by Master Hua. And I keep saying 六大种子. And my mom actually came this morning for the ceremony in the middle of when I was talking. Says, you gotta say it right. 种子 is seed. 宗旨 is principle. Don't get it wrong. So okay, got it. So 宗旨 is principle. 种子 is seed. Right, Yuan? Yeah. So that's something I learn every day. But I'll let Jin-Fo read the Chinese since his pronunciation is much better.
中文发音有时候是有四声的，那它这个种子跟中指是有不同的，种子跟中指是一点点啦，但是能够指正过来是非常好的。好，我们就从开始念，就是那一页把它念完就可以哈。好。
Okay, so read together from 我闻如是 on the left side of the page, and you'll see the romanization on the bottom. Okay.
OK， 好，我看大家一起念就好了哈。等一下再念英文哈。好，大家一起念中文。我闻如是，一时佛住王守成。其手结山中，以大比丘众12000人聚，一切大圣，神通已达。其名曰：尊者了本纪，尊者正验，尊者正语，尊者大好，尊者仁贤，尊者离垢。尊者明文，尊者善识，尊者祭足，尊者牛王，尊者优楼频楼假设，尊者迦耶迦舍，尊者拿提迦耶舍，尊者摩诃迦舍，尊者舍利弗，尊者大目犍连，尊者结宾那，尊者大住，尊者大净智，尊者摩诃周那，尊者满愿子，尊者离藏，尊者流贯，尊者坚福，尊者面王，尊者义成，尊者人性，尊者加入，尊者善来，尊者罗云，尊者阿难，皆如是等上首肘也。好，英文。
We can also read the English together, starting with "Thus I have heard." Okay. Thus I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying in Vulture Peak Mountain, in the capital city of Magadha, together with 12,000 great bhikshus. All were great sages who had already attained spiritual powers. Their names are Venerable Realizing the Ultimate Origin, Venerable Right Vows, Venerable Right Speech, Venerable Great Name, Venerable Benevolent Goodness, Venerable Free of Defilement, Venerable Renown, Venerable Reliable Goodness, Venerable Completeness, Venerable Lord of Cow, Venerable Urubilva Kashapena, Venerable Gaya Kashapa, Venerable Nadi Kashapa, Venerable Maha Kashapa, Venerable Shariputra, Venerable Maha Maguyana, Venerable Kapina, Venerable Great Existing, Venerable Great Pure Aspiration, Venerable Mahachunda, Venerable Son Complete in Vows, Venerable Free of Obstruction, Venerable River, Venerable Mighty Conqueror, Venerable King of Perfect Appearance, Venerable Extraordinary Vehicle, Venerable Kind-Hearted, Venerable Joy and Happiness, Venerable Welcome, Venerable Rahula, and Venerable Ananda. All of them were leaders among the assembly. Okay, so Jin-Fo Shi was just commenting on my last comment, saying that the Chinese language has 4 tones that goes flat, I think up, like a bungee, like down, up like a hook, and then it goes up, and then nothing at all. So 4 or 5 tones, and so for, you can say, an ABC like myself, who usually doesn't pay attention to, you know, those little up down things, I just try to remember the characters. So you can easily get the words wrong because you pronounce the word just by the characters that's on the page, and you kind of forget about the line for the tone. And the problem is that a different tone gives you a different word. And so I'm sure there's many kind of jokes you can do in Chinese when you get the tone wrong, but that's neither here nor there. I can see, though, from reading the names on the right side with the English, is that these Sanskrit names, when they were translated Chinese, I'm sure were equally difficult to pronounce for the Chinese people. Like, we just try to read Venerable Rubilva Kashyapena, and most Chinese people probably would probably get tongue-tied on that one. Okay, so we've been going over these venerables, and now we're actually at...
那个还有我再解释一下，刚才我好像有读到家舍，应该是读家舍，不是读家业，因为这个业也可以读舍，所以中文中国字的读法有时候是它要依照那个典故来读的，所以是要特别注意。
So Jin-Fo Shi just was just commenting that on one of the characters, he pronounced the character as ye. So we had for Kashyapa, that one of the ways got transliterated was into a Chinese character which has multiple pronunciations. So just to make things more complicated, one Chinese character can have many ways of pronouncing it in different situations. And so Jin-Fo Shi pronounced it as ye. But in this case, I think it's supposed to be sh. And because this was within the context of this text for these names, so we also have to pay attention to context when we pronounce the character to make sure we got the right sound. Okay, so that goes your... So that's their language lesson for today. If you're interested in learning Chinese, I'm sure you can find a class on it. And if you're interested in learning Sanskrit, you can also find a class on that. Actually, you can come to Dharma Realm Buddhist University, and we have classes on both, so you can learn Chinese and Sanskrit. Mm-hmm. Okay, so today we have gone through, last time, Venerable Kapina. Do people remember what we talked about him? He was a king who renounced his country, and he was so happy being a monk, he would just keep saying to himself, I'm so happy that the other monks were a little bit concerned about him, thinking that he was thinking about his life as a king, dreaming about his life as a king. And when they went to tell the Buddha said, actually, no, he's actually just really happy to be a monk and cultivating the way. And then kind of, you could say, Dianna bliss, into the happiness of meditation. So that was Venerable Kapina. And so today, we're going to talk about the next one, which is Venerable Great Existing. In the Sanskrit on the side, it says Venerable Maha. In the Chinese, it's, let's see here. I think it's 大祖, right? 尊者, but I can't find it. Okay. 大祖, okay, here we go. 尊者大祖. So we translate as Great Existing. In the Sanskrit, it's Mahakashtila, Venerable Mahakashtila. So we've actually mentioned him before. I don't know if people remember this Venerable at all from previous stories. What you find when you look into the background of these Venerables, they're all interrelated. They're all connected to one another. So I was wondering, do people remember who this person is? We've actually talked about him briefly. Any guesses? Anyone online? Anybody who has a thought? Venerable Maha. He's actually we even in Buddhism with Master Hua, he often tells the story of Venerable Maha. I'll give you a hint. He's related to Shariputra. Uncle, yeah, the uncle. That's right. So Venerable Mahakashtila is the uncle. Mahakashtila, do people remember what his name means from that story? Kashtila. So Maha is great, right? We've got a lot of Maha. So Maha is great. And then Kashtila. Do people remember Master Hua's commentaries? What is it? What do people remember about Shariputra's uncle? I'll tell you. Long nails. Long nails. Long nails. His name is Long Nails. And so here's the story. So the story Master Hua usually tells about Venerable Mahakashila is this. So Shariputra, Venerable Shariputra, whom we've talked about, I think maybe a couple months ago, is Venerable Shariputra's uncle. And Venerable Shariputra is seen as in the Buddhist tradition as the one foremost in wisdom. Among the Arhat disciples, he's the wisest. He has the greatest wisdom. And so his name, Shariputra, Shari is the name of his mother, and Putra means child. And so he's the son or child of Shari, right? Shariputra. And so Shariputra, when he was still not even born yet, he was in his mother's womb. He could actually influence his mother's wisdom. So I don't know if we can prove that, but this is how the story goes. And his uncle, before that could always beat his sister in debate. Whenever he talked to his sister, he could always out-talk his sister and prove his point. But all of a sudden, once his sister got pregnant, all of a sudden he started losing in the debate. And so he thought to himself, uh-oh, my nephew is going to be really wise. He's going to out-debate me. So his uncle, in order to prevent from, he thought to himself, I'm going to really lose face. If my nephew can out-debate me, that's going to be pretty bad. So he went off, and he went south, and he started studying all the various philosophical traditions. He really wanted to study hard in order that he won't be out-debated by his nephew. And so his name came from how hard he studied, because he studied so hard that he didn't even have time to cut his nails. So his nails grew very, very long. Right? And so Venerable Mahakashtila, essentially at that time, was studying, and finally he thought to himself, okay, I'm ready. I've mastered all these various philosophies. I can go back home, and whatever my nephew does, no problem. I can take him on. And so he goes back to see his sister, and he tells his sister, okay, where's your son? I would like to talk to him. He says, well, Venerable Shariputra, he's already became a monk under the Buddha. And this really got Venerable Mahakashila very upset, right? Because he was thinking of out-debating his nephew. He's like, what? How could the Buddha take my nephew? Who does the Buddha think he is? So he goes off thinking to himself, I'm gonna get my nephew back. I'm gonna out-debate the Buddha and get my nephew back. So he goes over to where the Buddha was. And let me give you a little background. In India, debate is like, I don't know what comparison we could have it in America. Maybe like basketball. I don't know. They actually use it for entertainment. It was really important in society. If you were a great debater, you were really well respected. Kings would hold the national debates between various teachers, and it's like the winner takes all kind of environment. And so debates were a big deal. Great Master Xuanzang, when he went to India from China, actually documented how important it was. That debates was really a national sport. It was more than just a sport. It actually was a way of seeing the world. So if you were a great debater, you really had engendered tremendous respect in society. Okay, so in this culture, debate was like extremely emphasized and extremely well respected, and losing the debate was a serious matter, right? So the Venerable Mahakashtila now is then going to see the Buddha to engage the Buddha in debate, and you'll see this many in the sutra text, that somebody comes to debate the Buddha, to kind of try to beat the Buddha. If they could beat the Buddha, of course, that's a tremendous respect. They've really proven, made themselves, up their status. So so he goes to see the Buddha, and so he sees the Buddha, and the Buddha is there sitting, and so he doesn't even bow. He just stands there and he says, "Okay, I want my nephew back." The Buddha goes, "Well, who's your nephew?" He says, "Well, my nephew is named Shariputra. I heard from his mother that he came with you to leave home." Well, the Buddha looks at him and says, "Oh, is that so? Well, did I force him to leave home?" He says, "No, but he's come to follow you. I'm sure you tricked him, and so I'm here to get him back." I said, "Okay." He says, "So I'm gonna debate you. If I win the debate, you have to give back my nephew, and if you win the debate, I'll give you my head. I'll cut off my head, I'll give my head." So he was that confident that, he's a master debater. He studied extremely hard, so whatever comes, no problem. He can beat the Buddha. And so the Buddha says, "Okay, so what position do you take?" And so Venerable Mahakashtila says, "My position is no position. Whatever position you give me, I don't accept. I don't accept any position." So the Buddha looks at him and says, "Well, do you accept your position?" This is how Master Fa tells the story. "Do you accept your position?" In that one move, Venerable Mahakashtila realized, wait a moment, if I say I accept my position, then I've just contradicted myself. And if I say I don't accept my position, then I don't even have anything to stand on. So at that point, he realized he lost. And so he then realized that if he loses, he has to cut off his own head. So he actually gets really anxious and he runs away. He sees the Buddha and he runs away. And then as the story goes, he's running back home, and halfway he goes to himself, "You know what? I'm really being a coward running away. I have to really live up to my word. We really, in society, really talk about honesty. So I told him I give up my head. I'll give him my head." So then he goes back to the Buddha, bring up all his courage, and he's in front of the Buddha and says, "Buddha, give me a knife." And the Buddha says, "Why do you want a knife?" He says, "Well, I'm going to cut off my head and give you my head because that's what I said." He says, "Well, you don't have to give me your head." He says, "No, I have to give you my head because that's what I promised to do." He says, "Well, things aren't so fixed. How about if rather than you give me your head, you cultivate the way?" He says, "Well, cultivate the way. How do I do that?" He says, "Well, you can leave home and cultivate the way. So rather than cutting off your head, you can actually dedicate your life to the Dharma and practicing the Dharma." And so Venerable Mahakashtila thought about that and said, "Okay, it's better than losing his own life." So he left home and cultivated and actually had a fair amount of accomplishment. And I also looked up his life in the Pali text, and it was also very fascinating to see his life story in the Pali tradition, because it has a slightly different version, a lot of similarities, but slightly different. And so in the Pali text, he's actually Shariputra's nephew. Yeah, which is interesting. He's actually Shariputra's nephew, and he does come and challenge the Buddha. And there's actually a whole sutta called the Dianna Sutta. So his name in the Pali is named Dianna, which means long nails. And so he comes to the Buddha, and again he said he's Shariputra's nephew, and at this point he's not coming to get Shariputra back, but he's just coming to debate the Buddha. And he's an ascetic. He's an ascetic wanderer. So the sutra starts here. This is the sutta, the Dianna Sutta. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta 74. And so it begins, "Thus I have heard, at one time the Blessed One was staying in the Boar's Cave in Mount Vulture's Peak, near Rajagaha. So people see here in our sutra text here is Vulture Peak Mountain, same place. Same place. So here is actually, there's a cave there called Boar's Cave. And so the Buddha was staying in there. So then it comes, then the wanderer, Diganaka, went up to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and friendly exchange was concluded, he stood at one side. Standing thus at one side, he said to the Blessed One. So no, he didn't actually bow down to the Buddha. He just, went to stand on the side. And at this point, he said, Master Gautama, my doctrine and view is this. I do not accept everything. Okay, so that's his view. It's just similar to what Master Hua in his story, right? How you could say our tradition, the tradition that we had inherited from Master Hua, how the story is told. Very similar. He says, I don't accept anything. I don't accept anything. So the Buddha says back to him, well, in this view of yours, I do not accept everything. Isn't this a view? Isn't this view at least acceptable to you? Right? A similar move as the other story we had is this view of yours that you don't accept anything, is that view acceptable? Now, what do you think he said? In the sutta, it's actually interesting because he actually has a longer exchange. It's not just one move over. It's got a lot of subtlety to it. So he says back to the Buddha, he says, Master Gautama, if that view of mine were acceptable to me, it too would be the same. It too would be the same, meaning that he would also not accept it. Okay, interesting. He says, I also wouldn't accept if that view of mine were acceptable to me, it would still be the same. He would still not accept it. So he's taking this kind of non-acceptance of any views at a very radical level. And so the Buddha says back to him, there are many in this world who say, it too would be the same, it too would be the same, and yet not abandon that view. And they take up some other view. And there are few are those in the world who say, it too would be the same, it too would be the same, and who abandon that view and do not take up another view. So this is an interesting thing that the Buddha does. Buddha says to him, okay, if that's what you say, you don't even take up that view, then I know in the world there are many people who can say that, yes, I don't take up a view. But when they say that, they actually really do take up a view. They take up another view because they can't maintain that no view. Or there's some people who are really able to really not have any views. So then he goes on, he says, Venerable, he calls him Agivasena. There are some recluses and Brahmins whose doctrine and view is this: everything is acceptable to me. And there are some who say nothing is acceptable to me. And there are some who say some views are acceptable to me and some views are not acceptable to me. So then the Buddha goes over these keys. You can say all the different views that are possible, right? Everything is acceptable, nothing's acceptable, some things are acceptable, some things are not acceptable. So the Buddha's pretty good at debate. He's kind of going through step by step all the various possibilities. And then the Buddha continues on, he says, among those who hold the doctrine, everything is acceptable to me, they are close to lust, or close to craving, close to bondage, close to delighting, close to holding, close to clinging. Because if you want everything is okay, then you're very close to your desires. You keep going forward, right? So then the Buddha says, next one, among those who hold the view, nothing is acceptable to me, they are close to non-lust, non-craving, close to non-bondage, close to non-delighting, close to non-clinging or holding, and close to non-clinging. So when the wanderer Diganaka, this is Venerable Mahakashila, he says, when Venerable Digananda heard this, Digananda said, Master Gautama commends my point of view. Master Gautama recommends my point of view. So at this point, he feels very happy. He thinks to himself, the Buddha actually says, my view is correct or very good. Right? He just said that those who think that they should accept all views, well, that is a way that leads to craving and and attachment and bondage. While those who reject views, they're free of, they're not close to that, right? They're farther away from that. So the Buddha continues on in this sutta, which is actually a very interesting sutta because it talks about views. And the Buddha then actually takes it another step and says, well, however, those who are wise, who hold on to a view that everything is acceptable to me, they don't, and if they begin to stubbornly stick to that view, thinking everything is acceptable to me and declare only this is true, everything else is false, then they have a fight with the other two views. So this morning, Jin-Fo talked about the 6 great principles, and the first one's not fighting. So that's the quickest way into a fight in your mind, is that you think, what I think is true, what everyone else thinks is wrong. You're ready to not get into a fight with somebody for sure, because now everything that person says is wrong, and what you think is right. And, I think you can think of the consequences of that. So the Buddha actually goes through the consequences of that. He says, well, if you have that view, then you end up in clashes, disputes, quarrels, and trouble. So because of that, a wise person abandons this view and does not take up any other view. So the Buddha then goes through the other views as well, that I do not accept any view, and I accept some views, and I don't accept other views. So you go through all 3 of these positions and says, if a wise person doesn't cling or attach to any of those, thinking this is right and everything else is wrong, right? So he goes through this process, and at that point, Venerable artist Dianna, he begins to see the problems of fixating on a view. And so the Buddha then does something very interesting. He teaches him meditation, right? He no longer engages him at the level of views and says, okay, take a look at your body. It is made up of 4 elements. It's impermanent. It passes away. It's not something that we want to attach to cling to, right? So he teaches him the contemplation of the body as something we don't cling to. And then he goes into feelings of pleasant feelings, painful feelings that are neither pleasant nor painful, are neutral feelings. And he says the same thing. He says all these feelings are impermanent, they're conditioned, they're dependently arisen, they're subject to destruction, they're subject to vanishing, they're subject to fading away, they're subject to ending. So he's saying these feelings that we have, they rise and they fall. I mean, this is actually a very profound insight in some ways, if you really think about it. That we're not our feelings. We're not our feelings. This is, I think, especially maybe more important in America than in China. I don't know if the Chinese make your feelings so important, but at least in my experience, having grown up in the West, our feelings are really important. It's like what your feelings are like. They're like your existential reality. And whatever my feelings are, if I really can you could say, experience them fully, that's really, living life in America. I don't know if that's so much in Asia. It seems like Asia has a whole different construct, but at least in the West, that experience of our feelings is really important. And then the problem, though, that what happens is that we oftentimes identify with our feelings, thinking they're who we are. Right? We think our feelings are who we are. And then what happens is, let's say we're depressed or we're unhappy. And so because of that, then we actually think, I'm depressed, I'm unhappy, and you kind of get caught in these feelings because they feed onto the ego. They feed the ego in this identity, and it just kind of reinforces itself. The same goes for pleasant feelings. We feel very happy. And so we go, oh, I'm really happy. I really like this happiness. And it reinforces itself. And then so we cling to these feelings very strongly. We identify with these feelings very strongly. And what that happens in Buddhism is because feelings, they're impermanent, they're conditioned, they're dependently arisen, they're subject to destruction, they're subject to vanishing, they fade away, and they cease. And because feelings then disappear, any amount of attachment and clinging we have onto them actually just reinforces a cycle of suffering over and over and over again. So that's the Buddhist insight. And actually, these kinds of meditation have become very popular in America. If you look at the mindfulness movements in America, it's usually talking about feelings. A little bit sometimes of the body, how we don't attach to the body. Like, by doing this contemplation, at least maybe we won't attach to the body so much, like the physical appearance, or when we're trying to make our body always be healthy. Oftentimes, as we know, the body decays. So if we don't attach to it in such strong ways, then when it decays, we don't have so much suffering. So these two practices meditation techniques have really come into the West. So here the Buddha teaches this method to Venerable Maha Kashtila. And so at that point, in fact, the Buddha continues on and says, a wise, noble disciple, having, you could say, lost all interest in pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neutral feelings, becomes free of passion, free of lust. And because they're free of passion and the lust, his mind then becomes liberated. And when he becomes liberated, there arises in him the knowledge. It has been freed. He understands, destroyed his birth, the holy life has been lived, what needs to be done has been done. There is no more to this state of being. There's no more further becoming. So in the Buddhist tradition, this is considered the realization of arhatship. They're free of birth and death. They've transcended samsara, right? So a monk who is thus liberated sides with no one and disputes with no one. He uses speech that is spoken and current in the world without being attached to it. And that's a very interesting principle. The monk uses speech that is spoken and current in the world without being attached to it. So that's the way the arhat uses language skillfully. They're able to use words appropriate to what's going on, but is not attached to it. They don't side with anyone. They don't fight with anyone, right? They've been able to put down their false views. So in this process of cultivation, the Buddha is actually giving a methodology through this kind of insight meditation, step by step, looking at the body, looking at the feelings, that will allow us to be liberated. So the Buddha is not actually putting forward another view. He actually first, you could say, deconstructs the views, or you could say untangles the views that Venerable Maha Kashtila had by showing him different facets of that view. If you say you don't take any view, well, do you take no view in this way? You take no view in that way? These are the problems if you hold that really tightly. And then he kind of lets go of that a little bit. And then the Buddha gives him actually a method for practice. So I don't know if people can understand that story, or if people ever have kind of experienced this in the sense of the view of trying to take no view. I don't think it's too uncommon in modern times. It's a kind of a little bit of a extreme skeptical view of everything. It's like the ultimate cynical view of everything. You kind of, say, well, whatever you tell me, I can deconstruct it. I don't take your view. I can see through it. Right? There's this kind of constant pushing away. And so I don't think it's that uncommon in our modern times as well. So the Buddha's response to that was this. Now in this sutta, what happens actually is Venerable Shariputra is actually standing behind the Buddha. And it says he's standing behind the Buddha, and he has this thought, the Blessed One indeed speaks of us of abandoning these things through direct knowledge, for seeing it for yourself. He indeed speaks of us of the relinquishing of these things through direct knowledge. So he says letting go of these things, letting go of the body, letting go of feelings, not getting attached to them, by seeing it clearly for yourself. And so at that point, Venerable Shariputra, reflecting thus, through not clinging, his mind was liberated from all outflows. So this is the point Venerable Shariputra actually becomes an arhat. In the Pali tradition, he's standing behind the Buddha, and in this version, his nephew comes, and the nephew asks the same question, and this is the exchange going back and forth. And the Shariputra, hearing that exchange, actually becomes an arhat from the Buddha's teaching there. And Venerable Mahakashila, or Diganaka, he actually becomes a stream enterer, a first stage arhat. So it says here, and at that point, the wanderer Diganaka had the dust-free, stainless Dharma eye arise in him, and see all that is subject to arising is subject to ending. The wanderer Diganaka saw this truth, won the truth, knew the truth, plunged into the truth, crossed over doubt, abandoned uncertainty, who, independent of others, has gained self-confidence in the teacher's teaching. So this is often how the stream enterer is described. They actually have actually an insight into the Dharma. They see the Dharma. They see the way things are, and by doing that, they gain this kind of unshakable confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, because they see it for themselves. So the faith in the Dharma comes from clear seeing, comes from understanding. And so he had this profound insight. And at that point, he actually says, Venerable Master Gautama, just as if one were to place upright what has been overturned, right? So if you have a bowl upside down, you turn it over. Or you're to reveal what was hidden, or to show the way to one who was lost, or to hold up a lamp in the dark so those with eyes could see. In the same way, in numerous ways, the Dharma has been made clear by the Master Gautama. So I go to the Master for refuge, to the Dharma and the Sangha. May the Master remember me as a disciple who has gone for refuge from this day forth for life. So that's the text. It talks about how Venerable Mahakashila, you could say, becomes a Buddhist disciple. And in this text it says he becomes a layman, but in other texts it says he probably became a monk. After he became a stream enterer, he was already an ascetic, so he probably left home and became a monk under the Buddhist tradition. So you get a flavor of Venerable Mahakashtila's kind of personality. Right? He comes in as a very studious ascetic, philosopher, debater, and then he enters the Buddha's order. Essentially, he enters the Buddha's order kind of after being out-debated and then taught by the Buddha, and then he enters. And so in the Buddhist tradition, he's actually considered one of who was very eloquent. He was very eloquent, which makes sense because he spent so much time studying the various philosophies. So in the Buddhist tradition, he was very eloquent. Yeah? Yeah, if you just look up Diganaka Sutta, and if you're online, you can probably find that in the Google. You just type that in. But essentially, I think it's the Majjhima Nikaya 74. So you just type that in. It'll probably be the first 2 or 3 suttas that pop up. Yeah. Yeah, the Infinite Life Sutra is on our website. So if they have the link, there's a little, if you look at the website on top, there's a bar that says classes and maybe events. You click in, there's one tab that says, I think, Infinite Life Sutra. You click that and you go to a page, and there you'll see there's a link to the sutra text. Okay, so that's Venerable Maha Kashtila. I don't know if people have any questions about him, but that's pretty much all I know about him, so I couldn't answer any more of your questions unless other people have ideas. But he's sounds like a very interesting person, and I think his actual sutta is very valuable for modern times. It's very valuable for modern times. For me, I can tell a story which I've told a number of times, but I think it's a good enough story to tell more because it points to this particular principle, was that as a kid growing up, I was very opinionated. I think people probably know the story. And I remember at one point when I was, I think elementary school or middle school. I think it was elementary school. So I was actually picked on a lot when I was in elementary school. But I remember one time one of these kids came up to me and told me, you know what, you argue a lot. Like you debate a lot. And I said back to him, no, I don't. And he said, see, you're debating, you're arguing. And I said to myself, well, that's not fair. If I said yes, then I would be giving in and saying that I argue a lot. If I said no, then he says, that I debate all the time. So I thought to myself, gosh, I can't win. This is that's not right. So I remember going home, and that really, struck me because it was such a like a lose-lose situation that it really stuck with me. I'm probably like maybe 12 years old. Maybe not even 12, maybe like 10 years old, and so I go home and I think to myself, gosh, and I never worked it out. I couldn't figure out how to respond, until after I started studying the Dharma. And so I gave the story before, and so I don't know if people remember what I said about it. But I realized after studying the Dharma, so it's somehow this seed, I guess, stuck in my mind, because I guess somehow when I started practicing, the seed must have arisen in my mind, and I go, oh, this is how I would respond now, with some wisdom rather than just, from ignorance. And I remember people remember what I said. Any takers? Well, or at least somebody would ask you that, what would you say? Alan, you want to?
Well, I think I was asked that question as well. But now my question will be, yes, I think you are right.
Yeah, so that was my my realization is, yeah, I probably would say, yeah, I think you're right. And if you can help me out, when you see me arguing a lot, let me know and I'll try to change, right? So that's, you take a step back. And it seems like a very kind of simple story, but I actually think it's a really important principle. Because many times in our relationships with other people, it could be spouse, it could be kids, it could be parents. It just takes that one step back of not trying to win or trying to be right, that something else opens up. Because if we stay in that position of, I need to be right, I need to win, then, and if both people maintain that position, in the end, it's just a lot of suffering. It's just a lot of suffering. So if one person's willing to step back, my experience has actually been, if you step back, interesting enough, oftentimes the other person also steps back because there's nothing to fight with. They realize, oh, you're stepping back. How can I fight with that? Oh yeah, please help me out. You're right. Please help me out. Okay, now what do I do? Do I attack him? I can't really attack him because he actually asked me to help him. So if I attack him, I'm actually helping him. So what do I do? It's kind of like, it's kind of changes the relationship pretty drastically. So, I mean, my experience is it actually really works. So if you're like, you have your parent who's always nagging you, you go, yeah, mom, you're right. Just let me know if, I do these things and I would try my best to change. Well, your mom go, huh, that's pretty different. I don't know what to do with that. And if you actually are genuine and sincere and you try to change, wow, then you can really be progressing in your cultivation. So, okay, so that's the first person, Venerable Maha. And the next one is Venerable Maha Katha, which is great pure aspiration. And Jin-Fo was going to speak a little bit about him. Actually, today I was supposed to talk more because Reverend Hong Sure said Jin-Fo has already carried a lot of these lectures. So he said I should probably do more of this lecture. So that's why I kind of started. Otherwise, Jin-Fo is, I think, the one who's does a lot of research for all of these disciples. So do you want anything to add about this? Oh, sorry, question. Knowing novel? Sorry, I don't. Maybe you can retype the question. I don't quite understand. If you type the question until Jerry understands the question, and then you can ask it. Okay. With this one, the Infinite Life, I don't think Master Hua lectured on the sutra on the Buddha teaching on the Infinite Life, right? 上次没有给. So there are other commentaries of the sutra by other monastics. I don't know if there's been any translated into English, but I know there's definitely quite a few in Chinese. So that would be a good question for Jin-Fo because my Chinese is not very good, and so I mostly read English. Okay. 你要不要再加什么东西关于摩诃那个 Mahakashtila 那个大组？你有别的东西要加吗？还是你要只是讲下一个？
这样大柱没关系。刚才
近一点。
大柱我查的是叫做迦旃延。那迦旃延，他这个尊者大致就是迦旃延中文。那个上人对这个有他的上人也有解释迦旃延所有的经过。他这样子你讲了我就不再讲，我就补充一下。
你就讲迦旃延。
迦旃延。
这个是他是最会解释佛法的吗？
算议论，对，议论。
这个是我不知道为什么，或者我们不知道是我们翻译错吗？因为那个是下一个是叫 Maha Katha Dianna， 他是我看他是这个迦旃延 ，Is that right？ 因为我去查的时候，那个我们用旁边这个字 Mahakashtila 跟 Mahakatha Dianna， 大旃延是 Mahakatha Dianna 是下一个，所以我不知道我们梵文大净智，它不是 Mahakatha Dianna 不一样吗？
大净智
是另外一个。
另外一个人。
哦。Well, maybe we check our translation, because it seems like we might have not put the right Sanskrit name with the right venerable, because so maybe we have a translation team working on it. We just need to double check that. How does Venerable Mahakashtila and Venerable Mahakatha Dianna fit into this text? So I just gave a commentary on Venerable Mahakashtila. Jin-Fo thinks that great existing refers to Mahakatha Dianna. So we'll get another explanation of another disciple who's also very important. So you'll get a chance to learn both of them. Yeah.
I'm checking our recitation book.
Yeah.
So in the Buddha Speaks on Untitled Sutra also mentioned about the Maha Yakayana, which is Mohe Jiazhan,
Yeah.
which is next great sage, venerable sage.
And Venerable Mahakashtila's name is what?
Is Jiazhan, Mohe Jiazhan.
How about Mahakashtila? Also, he's also there, right?
Mohe Juxilo.
Juxilo. Yeah. So I don't know if Mohe Juxilo is 尊者大住.
Yeah.
Is he?
尊者大智是谁
？Mahakashtila.
Juxilo. So we will double check. So I realized that we might have different names associated with different disciples.
所以大智讲不是迦旃延啊。
他们看了，但你主他大精智是另外一个人，对不对？
Yeah.
还是另外一个人？
另外一个人。
Okay, so we'll have to, but I think it's because of the sutra text, not because of the Sanskrit name. So we got the Sanskrit name correct, but so the tricky thing here, as we can see from translation, is that if you take the Sanskrit names into Chinese, there's different ways of translating it. One way is you transliterate the name. right? So you try to make Chinese characters that sound like the Sanskrit name. The other way is you try to translate the meaning of the name, right? So for instance, some people's Chinese name, like first my Chinese name right now is Jin-Chuan. So you could translate it as close transmission. And Jin-Fo could be close Buddha, right? That could be his translation into English, rather than Jin-Fo or Jin-Chuan. So the same thing happened from Sanskrit to Chinese. They would translate the meaning sometimes, they would translate into the transliterated Chinese characters. And even then, because the Chinese characters don't really match the Sanskrit characters that well, sometimes the transliteration is different by different translators. So it gets sometimes confusing how all these names interlink. So we'll look into that, and maybe next time we explain it, we'll make sure we got the right one. So we were essentially explaining, well, at least for me, I was telling the story of Venerable Maha Kashtila. Now, is Venerable Maha Kashtila the same as Venerable Great Existing? We'll have to double check. But we have the next one that Venerable, or Jin-Fo will describe, we'll talk about, is Venerable Maha Katha Dianna, who's also a very important disciple. 你讲下一个，对，
下一个就是
加赞言，对。
好，没关系，那我就讲。
So we'll take the next one. And can I just say one thing about him? 我想讲一句就是关于他。He's actually somebody we also know. In the Pali, it's Kachana. It's translated as Pali. In the Pali, it's Kachana, Maha Kachana. And do people know we had a friend in our community, part of DRBY, named Wit before? Do people remember Wit? I don't know. Maybe I'm. But he was in the Dharma realm Buddhist young adults or youth with me. And he became a monk at Abhayagiri. His name became Venerable Kachana. He got a PhD at UC Berkeley in physics. And so I realized his name is Venerable Kachana, which is the same as this. He's named after Venerable Maha Kachana. Right? Okay.
好，我想，因为早上我们在研究佛陀时代的这些弟子的名字，有的用名，对，刚才也有讲过，有的用名字，有的用他的意思过后面，所以有一些混乱。但是我们没关系，我们每一个佛陀，我们都可以作为我们学习的对象，这个是很好，因为他能够在佛陀那时候，这些讲出来都是正果的人，我们都可以学习。
So, as you can tell, sometimes the names is a little bit confusing. We're not sure how all of them line up. But regardless, all of these Arhat disciples are, you could say, worthy models, worthy role models that we can learn from. So as we study these great disciples, they're people we all can emulate and learn from.
好，下面我们就是讲尊者迦旃延，他是佛陀10大弟子之一。在翻译来讲，就是文思，就是他文学修持，非常美满。
So Venerable Maha Katha Dianna, his name in Sanskrit, Maha says great. Katha Dianna comes out in the Chinese as they try to translate it as literary elegance, being a very good writer, very good in literature.
所以迦旃延的文学才华非常好，而且能够善巧辩论，都能够使外道都能够心悦口服。
So he's very skillful in his writings and literature, and because of that, he's also very eloquent. And in debates, as we were just talking about how important debates are, he's able to out-debate other religious groups. Those we use the word sometimes externalists, but maybe say those who look outside of the nature, our Buddha nature, for awakening, they look outside.
这位尊者他还有一个名字叫做善圣，就是善子的绳子，意思就是把绳子，因为扇子是散开，然后绳子把它收起来。这个是仙公上人 他是讲说这个他母亲他他没有多久，他父亲死了，他母亲想改嫁，但是改嫁不得，就被拴住，这样子把他没有去改嫁，就是把他抚养长大这样子。这个拴住就把像扇子把它用绳子拴起来这样子。
So another name for him, a way of explaining his name is that a cord or rope of a fan. So a fan is kind of open, and then you use a rope to tie it up. And so when he was young, his father died, and so his mother, you could say, couldn't go out and kind of do whatever she wanted because of him. He was her child. So he can say kind of like a rope tying up his mother.
上人还有说他还有一个名字叫做好肩，因为这些尊者的这个两个肩膀长得非常好看，所以人人看了都很喜欢他的肩膀。
So his next one is that he had very beautiful shoulders. So I guess you have to kind of imagine that, very beautiful shoulders, that everyone who saw his shoulders thought they were very beautiful.
而且他还有一个名字叫做思圣，就是思想非常殊胜，所以他后来他很有辩才，他辩才无碍，在弟子当中呢是议论第一的，被称为议论第一。
So he also, you could maybe call him a supreme philosopher, a really good thinker. He's just really sharp, really smart, and a kind of intellectual, the top intellectual. And so he really had unobstructed eloquence, really good at debate. And so in the Buddha of the great disciples, he was considered the foremost in, you could say, explanation of the Dharma.
他说出的道理都非常正确，他所说的真理都能够给人家非常佩服，所以非常合情合理，所以能够降服外道。
So whatever answers he gave always accorded with principle and was won other people's admiration. So in that way, he was able to subdue, or you could say, transform others, those who were following other paths. He would be able to impress them, and then they would want to follow him.
有一天，那个直断直肠的外道，他问说：佛教说六道轮回，人死了以后来世投生，为什么到现在很多死了以后都没有回来报告情况？
So one example of this is at one time, one of these people from, you could say, studying another practice, another way, who believed in annihilationism, or essentially when we die, there's nothing afterwards. That when you die, there's no rebirth, there's no future lives. And so he came to debate with Venerable Maha Katha Dianna and said to them, Buddhism, you teach that after you die, there's rebirth, that people come back and into another life. Well, if that's the case, then why isn't that there are people who would report back and tell us that they got reborn? Isn't that something that is, you don't have any proof that there's rebirth?
那尊者就回答，他是说，人死了以后，就好像被判罪在监狱里面，就不能够自由出狱，所以还回来告知家人，是不能够的。
So the response from Venerable Maha Katha Dianna was, well, when you die, or when a person dies, let's say they go into the hells. They go into the hells, it's kind of like being in jail. And so when they're in jail, they can't just get out. They have to, they can't just come out whenever they want. And so that's not so simple.
那外道有问，那做好人可以升天，而且在天上非常快乐享福，但是为什么都没有回来报告佳音，就是好的声音？ 都没有回来报告，他们又这样子问。
So this other person of the other sect would counter back saying, well, okay, you say that's for people who did bad things. Well, how about people who do good things and go to the heavens? Why don't they report back to their families saying, you know, I'm really happy, I'm here in the heavens, everything is good. Why don't they come and tell them that?
所以尊者他就回答说人升到天上，就好像人从粪坑里面爬出来，然后用清水洗干净了身子，他不会再想去粪坑里面。所以人这个世界就好像粪坑一样不干净的世界，所以这个一些善人他往生天上以后，他是不会回来报告的。
So Venerable Maha Katha Dianna responded back saying, okay, well, it's like you are in a pit toilet. You know, people know pit toilets. You know, if you're out in your Buddha Root farm, you know, those toilets are just a big hole in the ground. And so you're in there and it's really smelly and you get out and you wash out, you clean up. But would you want to just go right back in? You want to jump back in? And probably not, you know, it's too, you know, you're now all clean. And so he said, well, those who end up in the heavens after they die, they actually see our human realm just like this pit toilet. They don't want to come back into this smelly pit toilet.
所以他这样子的回答外道就没有话说仙公上人对这位尊者也称赞，在偈颂里面有说那个这样子讲，恶者日地狱，故难还。善事离垢不复沾，议论第一超俗类，雄辩盖世圣邪言。意思就是说，我们那些作恶的人到地狱里面，一定是被关在那里，很难回来。那做好的人，因为到天上，他已经离开这个五浊恶世了，所以不会再想回来。所以再来议论第一，因为我们刚才讲过了，他是被称为议论第一的，所以他能够超这个世间的一些情况，然后所以他的辩才盖世就是能够战胜这一些外道邪言。
So his response back left the annihilationist without anything to say, because he could see the logic of his responses. And so Master Hua even wrote a verse for this. He said that, so it's not going to come out very poetic in English, but it's written very nicely in Chinese poetry. So those who do evil end up in the hells and can't return, while those who do good are able to leave the filth of this world, and so then they also don't return. The one foremost in the explaining principles is Venerable Maha Katha Dianna, and he is strong in debate and is able to you could say tame. He's able to 是圣邪
盖世圣邪跟
So
圣
he
邪
can
言
he can teach those who have confused views, who don't see things clearly.
仙公上人还有说一个公案，我也顺便提出来，就是在佛陀的时候，有一个阿婆提国的贫苦的老妇人，她非常可怜，她常常被她的主人鞭打。那有一天，她去拿水在河边里面，然后想到自己的遭遇，所以在河边就哭起来。
So another story told by Master Hua was that there was a poor elderly woman who was, you could say, a servant in another place of a master. And that master was very cruel and would beat her and scold her. So one day after he scolded her and beat her, she went next to the river to get water for the household, and she was really upset and crying.
所以迦旃延他看到他的姻缘，就问他说：“你那么贫穷，为什么不把贫穷卖掉呢？”他说：“我一点钱也没有，我怎么能够把谁要买我这个贫穷？”
So that time, Venerable Maha Katha Dianna saw her and said to her, "Wow, you're suffering a great deal, and you're so poor. Why don't you sell your poverty to somebody else?" She said, looked at him and said, "What do you mean? You know, I'm so poor, I have nothing. What can I sell? Who would want to buy my poverty?"
那这个尊者他就说：“有办法，我来买。你用瓶子，就是他去拿水，他用他的瓶子，你装满干净的水来供养我。”那老妇人说：“这个瓶子也是主人的啊，我怎么可以拿来供养呢？”尊者说：“瓶子是主人的，但是那个水是你的，你可以拿来，就属于你的了。”
So the Venerable said, "No problem. You can sell your poverty to me. So what you can do is you can get some water in that vessel of yours, get some pure water, you can make an offering." And she said, "How can I do that? Even this vessel is not mine. This vessel is my master's." Says, "Well, the vessel is your master's, but you're here to get water. And so the water you get is yours. So you can offer the water."
所以他听了非常的高兴，就赶快去拿水来供养。那尊者就接受了，然后就给他做三皈五戒，并且叫他修行念佛法门。因为老妇人嘛，就是多念佛，所以他就一直念佛。所以后来当天晚上老妇人就死了，他就往生到到地天上去了。这个是一个公案。
So the old lady was extremely happy, got some water and offered it to Venerable Maha Katha Dianna. And afterwards, the Venerable Maha Katha Dianna helped her take refuge and also transmitted the 5 precepts and taught her the practice of being mindful of the Buddha, because she was older and that would be a good practice for her. And so she went home and practiced vigorously, and actually the next day she actually went off to rebirth, and she was reborn in the heaven of the 33, one of the very in the heaven, Chayamshimsha heaven.
还有他也很会教化人家，甚至于在梦中来教化一些人，所以这也是正宫上人讲的那时候迦旃延他收了一个徒弟，这个徒弟呢是一个国王，他叫做西楼王，这个西楼王他后来他也很有善根，出家了，然后他修苦行，然后也入中医师，他在树下里面也一手就是在树下里面过夜，然后做种种的头型，所以他头发没有理胡子很长就好像是山野人一样。
Okay, so 会加几个东西关于那个后面的故事，然后给我翻译，帮你翻译。So I just wanted to add something about these last stories, just so we can kind of digest them a little bit. So people remember the first one was the response to the annihilationist. I thought if you look at his responses, it was very skillful. I don't know if that was a convincing argument for you if you don't believe in rebirth. But in terms of how he responded back to this person of another religion, he actually took him through a logical process that was consistent in their understanding of the world. Right? The one before about how if you think about somebody who's in jail, can they just come out whenever they want? Well, they can't. It says, well, like being in the hell is like being in jail. You can't just come out whenever you want. And they said, well, how about the heavens, right? So the person asked about the heavens. He said, well, in the heavens, it's because they see this world as like a toilet. They don't want to come back. And so by teaching in that way, he's not, you could say, fighting like we were just talking before about views and fighting. He wasn't fighting with him and says, you're wrong, I'm right. He actually was just saying, okay, let me look at your logic, and you're saying your reasoning is this. So I'm giving you a way to understand through your reasoning how what we're saying in the Buddhist or in the Buddhist teachings, how cause and effect, how there's rebirth. So that's skillful teaching. And I think in terms of this principle about how we communicate, that if we try to use our own views to say I'm right and you're wrong, that doesn't really go very far. So the way that's more skillful is actually listen to the other person and then try to understand their reasoning and try to use their reasoning to help them understand something. I mean, that's also if you're a teacher, that's probably how you want to teach too, right? Otherwise, there's not oftentimes too much communication. So that's the first one. The second story, I think, is very important because it's actually talking about the power of generosity. Just ability to give water with sincerity to, you could say, a sage, an enlightened being, Venerable Maha Katha Dianna, brought blessings to be born in the heavens. And so I know people come to the monastery oftentimes to make offerings and do, like today we had the bathing Buddha ceremony, and then we had a lunch with everyone together. You can see the power of offerings, the power of generosity in, as you can say, as an antidote to the suffering of poverty. That's, I think, a very valuable teaching there to pay attention to. Okay, and then the next one is another story of Venerable Maha Katha Dianna that Master Hua gives. And so Venerable Maha Katha Dianna is very skillful. He can even teach in dreams. So this is actually a very interesting story, he said. So Venerable Maha Katha Dianna has a disciple who used to be a king named Shila. And so he left home under Venerable Maha Katha Dianna and then learned the Dharma and then went off to cultivate on his own. And he was actually very ascetic. He would eat one meal a day, practice various ascetic practices, and was very vigorous in his practice.
我们是不是到几点？
可以讲，我们可以9点15分，没问题。
15分了，好，这样子啊，这个国王他出家修行，好像是山野人一样。那他旁边又有一个国王出去打猎，他带着这个宫女，然后就去在那里那国王带着宫女出去以后就睡着了，因为他疲倦了。这个是另外一个国王。那这些女人，他就跑到那个他这个山野人，就是这个国王修行人这里啊，就围着他给他们说法。
Okay, so this King Shila, left home and became an ascetic, and so he was cultivating out in the wilderness, on this mountain, very vigorously, and he would just kind of just live very naturally. So he didn't cut his hair. He just kind of looked. I don't know what's a sanyas in English? Like a wild man.
Yeah, wild man.
A wild mountain man. He looked like a wild mountain man.
Yeah.
And so long hair, just kind of not really washed. And so one day, another king from a neighboring country came to this place to hunt. And after hunting, the king got tired and got some rest. But the king actually brought a lot of his, I don't know what you would call them, concubines, like the palace ladies, that he kind of keeps as his consort, or what do we call them? His harem of women. Yeah, his harem of women. So he comes with all these women, and so he falls asleep. So they are all there, and so they actually find this kind of wild mountain man.
还给他们这些女人，她看到野人，然后就围着他，还给他们说法。
So they all got very interested in him, thinking, "What was this?" And then so he started teaching all these women the Dharma.
那这个说法的时候啊，他那个邻居国王他睡醒了，他看到宫女在听法，就心中非常嫉妒，就把这个山野国王就打了一顿，而且打伤了。那这个他就 这个三叶国王他就想，他不当国王了，他想还俗，去跟他打，跟那个国王一起打，打仗啊，就对了。
So this other king woke up and he saw this wild mountain guy speaking Dharma, or just you could say just talking to all his harem of women. So he got really jealous and angry. This is probably not uncommon. And so he then went and beat up King Shila, or the one who became an ascetic. Master Paul actually, I read the story just right before, said that the king who left home actually had a lot of martial skill, but because he was cultivating for a while, he forgot most of it, and so he got beaten up pretty seriously, and so he got pretty angry. He's like, gosh, I got beaten up by this other king. He says he made a resolve. I'm gonna return to lay life, and I'm gonna really beat up that other king. So he was gonna go get revenge.
所以他想回去报仇，但是他先还是向他的师父迦旃延请求还俗，但是他没有准许他，并且劝他说：“不要报仇了，你就认因果好了。大概你前生打他，所以你今生也会被打，所以你还是认账吧。”
So
他的这个师父迦旃延跟他讲。
So Venerable, he left home under Venerable Maha Dianna, right? So he went to Venerable Maha Dianna to essentially give up his vows to return to lay life, right? So what do you think Venerable Maha Dianna says? Well, Venerable Maha Dianna actually encouraged him, don't return to lay life. How about this? Think about it as karma, that you're just repaying your past debt to this king. You probably beat up that king in a previous life, so now you're just receiving the retribution from your past actions.
所以他又讲说，他明明是他打伤我的，我一定要跟他去算账。所以但是他的这个师父就劝弟子劝不听，那这个迦旃延就说：“那好。”那你就还俗，回去当国王。
So this king, or the king turned ascetic, who was the disciple, told the Venerable Maha Dianna, saying, "What do you mean that this is my karma? That's not right. It's clearly he came and beat me up. I really got to get even. This is not fair." And so he says, "I'm going to return to lay life. I'm going to really get him." And so Venerable Maha Dianna looked at him and said, "Okay, well, if you want to return to lay life, you can return to lay life."
所以他就想就是回当国王，但是跟他讲说，你回去以前，你今晚你就不要在这边睡一天，明天再走吧。
So Venerable told him, "Well, it's kind of getting late, so just spend the night, and tomorrow then go back."
所以这个弟子看了天色也是差不多很晚了，那明天再回去，所以他就答应就在那边睡一觉。那这个迦旃延就在梦中来教化他。
So he said, "Okay, yeah, looking, it's kind of late." Says, "Okay, I'll stay here one night and then I'll go back, and go to war against that other king." So he stayed a night, but at night, Venerable Maha Dianna taught him in a dream.
所以在梦中就见他自己已经还俗了，然后整顿大军，带着10万大军去跟邻国来打仗，但是每一战都是失败。
So in this dream, he returned to lay life, and he went back to his country, and he got all his generals and like 100,000 soldiers, and they were going to battle. But in every single battle, he lost.
结果，所以10万大军全部都覆没，然后全部都被杀，只有剩下他一个人，所以他也被敌国军队抓去，就把他绑起来，准备把他砍头。
So he battle after battle he lost, so that all of his army died, all of them got killed, and so he was the only one left over, and he was captured by the enemy army, the opposing army, and he was brought back, tied up, bound, into the other country in front of the other king, and he's gonna get beheaded.
所以他要被砍头的时候，这时候他想起来了，他师父来了，哦，他非常的惭愧心，然后后悔不听他师父的话教导，所以才会沦落到今天的惨败的下场，就请求他师父赶快来救我。
So at that point in his mind, right before he's going to be beheaded, he thought to himself, "Oh my goodness! I wish I had listened to my teacher's instructions and not returned to the lay life." He prayed, "Please come and rescue me. Please come and help me."
所以他口里面一直讲，但是这个对方的国王就还是不理他，然后就把刀子一下子刀子把头砍下去，他一惊就醒了。
So he was constantly saying to himself, "Please save me, please save me." The other king didn't pay him any mind and took the sword out and just chopped off his head. And the moment the sword came and it was cutting off his head, he woke up from his dream. That's called a teaching.
所以原来是一场噩梦，然后第二天他就去跟他的师父忏悔，不再还俗了，所以认真修行。
So at that time he woke up from that dream, which was a nightmare, and the next morning went to his teacher and repented and didn't return to lay life, and he continued to cultivate the way with vigor.
所以上人又给迦旃延一个赞颂，这样子讲的：善巧方便说诸法，威德感召化3000，度人无量功德普，圆满菩提道德全。
So the Master Hua wrote.
就是说他很会，对，很会善巧说法。
So he had extremely had had a lot of skillful means, and was able to speak the Dharma eloquently. His deportment was awe-inspiring. Was able to move the 3,000 great thousand world systems. He's able to teach and transform many limitless beings. And his meritorious virtue was all pervasive, and he was able to fulfill Bodhi, and his virtue in cultivating the way was complete.
其实迦旃延佛陀也有跟他受记成佛，他的名号是圆湖那提金光如来。
So he also received a prediction for Buddhahood from the Buddha. His name was Jambunandabasa. I looked it up in the Lotus Sutra, in the Sanskrit. But he also, in the Chinese, is Jambunanda Golden Light.
对就所以
Tathagata, yeah.
就也可以简称说金光如来。
金光如来. So also going to be Golden Light Tathagata.
因为他将来的这个国土没有地狱、恶鬼、畜生、阿修罗这个4个恶道，所以很多天上的人和人间的人，还有声闻、缘觉、二乘人，以及行菩萨道的这个大菩萨，有无量万亿那么多，来庄严这个他的这个佛的国度。
So in this land, there are no of the 4 lower destinies of the hells, hungry ghosts, animals, or asuras. So that just leaves the human and the devas. And then there's beings who are like the arhats, the Pracheka Buddhas, the bodhisattvas. And so there's many beings there, limitless beings there. And there's no evil destinies.
所以这一尊佛的寿命有12小节那么长。
So his lifespan is 12 small kalpas.
所以晚上我们有听了两个故事，就是可以把贫穷卖掉。这个最重要，就是说我们能够常常要发心，发出真诚心、恭敬心，也来认真修行，是可以转变的，是可以卖掉我们的不好的这一生，所以要认真修行。
So today we've heard a couple stories. One story was about selling our poverty, right? The old lady who sold her poverty. So if we can be sincere and generous, then we're able to transform the bad things of our life into good things. If we can be vigorous in our cultivation and apply effort, then we can change for the better.
所以第二个故事也是说，我们今生所做的就是我们前生的今生的果就是前一生的，那我们今生做的就是下一生的会出现，所以我们修行人就是不要常常就是发脾气，就是一样的不争、不贪、不求的这个六大宗旨。所以这个他迦山言他讲的没有错，要认账，我们也是一样的。要认识因果，不要一直跟人家争斗这些都是没有争来争去都是两败俱伤的。
So the things that happened in the other story with the King Shila, who was an ascetic, and then he felt like he got wronged by the other king. Well, in that story, there's a principle that the things that happen to us in this life are retributions or effects that come from our previous lives. So we don't need to be so angry about feeling wrong by something happened, because it's what we do in this life is what forms our future. So if we can understand cause and effect, then we don't get angry, we don't fight, we're not greedy, we don't seek, and we can follow the 6 great principles given by Master Hua.
好，大概我们时间也差不多了，就9点15分。
So we pretty much at the end of our sutra lecture. It's about 9:15. Is there any final questions or thoughts? So we went over Venerable Maha Kashtila and Venerable Maha Katha Dianna. These two actually come up quite a bit in our sutras, so if you pay attention, you'll see them coming up. You have a question, Yuan?
It's not a question.
Okay.
It's more like comment. I'm checking my notebook back to last year, the last day of 2016. Fashi actually mentioned about the story of Maha Kuja, and mentioned about the name, the long nail.
Yeah, Maha Kashtila.
Right, because in the note I do have this. It's a self-reflection that how quickly I could forgot all the Fasci's teaching. So, and also remind me of Buddha's teaching, how important of constantly xunxi, like constantly not away from the studying and recollecting.
Constantly review and
reviewing too.
Yeah. One thing that really helps is having to teach it, quote unquote. So having to give these lectures really makes it go deeper into your memory, because probably it goes through my mind too. And then I have to prepare it, so then it forces me to actually think about it a little bit more, so then I remember it from before. So, okay.
I'd like to express my gratitude of how important to learn all those stories of those great sages, because before those sages, just then I know they are inconceivable, great, but by hearing the story and how they strive for Buddhahood, it's really inspiring.
Great. Okay, so you have another question? For this one, the Limitless Life Sutra. The thing is, there's a small translation group working on translating it kind of bit by bit. So I think we only have a few pages. So we don't have a full translation of the Limitless Life Sutra.
Not yet.
However, I think there are some full translations online. I think if you look online for the sutra. I think Numata has a translation. I think there's also one by Gomez has a translation. So you can, if you search online, you can find a translation of the Limitless Life Sutra. Sometimes I think the longer Sutra of Amitayus. So if you look it up, you can find it. But we're trying to work on another translation so that we can kind of digest it more deeply. Okay, so we look like Alan's actually going to be using his guitar, so we can sing our translation or dedicate our merit with some background music. So I appreciate everyone coming out for today's sutra lecture. We know that everyone's probably, if you're students, probably finishing up your school semester, so wish you the best in your finals or final papers. And for, I think, other people, there's probably a lot of things happening in the world that need support. To be honest, having been in the monastery, I don't know all the details, but I hear things here and there, and it seems to me our world really needs help. So we probably want to send out goodness as far as we can reach with our hearts and minds. Okay, so the transference verse is in the back of the dedication of merit. So if you have it, it's over here. Dedication of merit. Okay? Our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Can we all stand and bow to the Buddhas and Master Hua?